Hey guys, let's do a quick overview of supply and demand and the impact on market price and equilibrium quantity when we have changes in supply and changes in demand. The first thing we have to get really good at is setting up our supply and demand graphs. And here's a good trick for remembering how to do this. I always say, mind your P's and Q's, and that is for price and quantity. So once we get really good at setting up our graphs, we'll just know, we say, mind your P's and Q's. And this actually came from Old English pubs. Mind your pints and quarts. Don't drink too much. I think of mind your P's and Q's, I think mind your manners. Well, that's kind of what this means as well. Don't drink too much. Mind your P's and Q's. So we understand as consumers that when we have a high price for something, we don't demand a lot of it. So the downward slope of the demand curve makes sense. We say demand down. When we talk about the supply curve, now we have to start thinking like producers. We say sunny side up to get the upward shape of our supply curve. And this makes sense when we truly think about the producer mindset. As the price of an item increases, we want to get in that market. We want to sell more. And this causes the shape of the supply curve to curve upward like this. Now, you've read in the chapter some determinants of supply and some determinants of demand. Things that make these whole curves either shift to the right as an increase or shift to the left as a decrease. And it's important that we remember that we're either shifting right or left. We're never shifting up or down, and you'll understand why in just a minute. When we have a change in supply or a change in demand, this is different from a change in quantity supplied or a change in quantity demanded. The only thing that changes quantity supplied or quantity demanded is a change in price. So we would actually move along the demand line, for example, if there were a change in price that causes a change in quantity demanded. Same thing with a change in quantity supplied. It's a movement along the supply curve. Okay, this is different from a change in supply or a change in demand, where we're shifting the whole curve. Let's take a look at a couple examples where we have a change in supply or a change in demand. Let's imagine that we've drawn here the market for Tim Hortons coffee. And let's say that in this scenario, the price of Dunkin' Donuts coffee doubles. So we're talking about two goods here that are substitutes. We don't necessarily drink Tim Hortons and Dunkin' Donuts at the same time. We're going to go for one or the other. So when we have an increase in the price of a substitute good, it increases the demand for the good in question. That looks like this on our chart. It's an increase of the whole demand curve. One thing I should have done first here is just note our equilibrium quantity and our equilibrium price to start. So we have an increase in demand for Tim Hortons coffee as a result of an increase in price of Dunkin' Donuts coffee. Okay, what happens to our change in equilibrium price and quantity? Let's take a look. We have a new quantity, it's increased, and we have a new equilibrium price, that's increased as well. Okay, let's talk about another scenario. I'll erase this, which will give us good practice for drawing it again, and you'll want to go through this as you go through your homework assignments, practicing setting up these charts and these graphs. So here's how we remember it. Demand down and sunny side up for supply and demand. Let's note our original equilibrium price and our equilibrium quantity. Okay. Now, we're going to imagine that there's a drought in Colombia and the price of coffee beans soars. We're Tim Hortons coffee. Is this a supply issue for us or is this a demand issue? Well, this is a supply issue, and it causes a decrease in supply. So the whole supply curve shifts to the left. Now remember, we're shifting left with a decrease. Here's where you can get confused if you think you've shifted up. That would imply an increase, but it's a decrease in supply, so you're shifting to the left. Let's take a look at our new equilibrium price and our new equilibrium quantity. We see in this scenario that the price has increased and the quantity has decreased. Now sometimes you're going to have more than one thing happening with each scenario. Here we have a decrease in supply as a result of an increase in the price of coffee. What if we also have this increase in demand that came from a result of a dramatic increase in price for Dunkin' Donuts coffee? Remember that demand curve shifting to the right, representing an increase in demand? Now we have a new equilibrium quantity, S1 intersecting with D1. Okay, we can't quite tell what happened with the quantity. We can see that the price increased dramatically. We have a clear increase in price. But look at what's happened. We've gone back to a similar point where we started with equilibrium quantity. We call this being indeterminate, and that's because we can't tell what happened with quantity. It all depends on the amount these curves shifted. What if the demand curve shifted only a little bit? We'd end up with an equilibrium quantity decrease. What if the demand curve shifted a lot? We'd end up with an equilibrium quantity increase. Well, we can't tell, and so we call it indeterminate.